Hey traders, this is Raghee, and we're back for the second installment of what has been much more popular than I really anticipated it being. I think it's a great idea. I'm just so pleased that so many people are getting it, and that's this trade story process that I shared back in mid-December. And so now I want to follow up with that and talk about, basically this would be part two to that concept that I introduced, and I'm going to take you through the first three steps. Now, these are steps that I do day in and day out in my chat room and at my site at simplerforex.com. And I think the first three steps, what I'm sharing with you, are probably the most important three steps because this is where there is still an exit. There's still a back door. There's still an escape hatch. And I'm going to explain to you why that is so powerful. So let's talk about a little bit of a recap, and then we're going to move forward. So the big recap is this. A trade is a story that you can wrap your head around and prove with price. We talked about that. That's the big concept. Okay? The quick recap is this. Are you thinking about your story having a natural arc? Introducing the concept of the story, kind of taking you through the plan, finally to the trigger, and then to the result. I mean, that's what a movie does over and over and over again. And I shared Shakespeare's play process. I shared some popular 5 and 7 point story processes in the first video, so I'm not going to rehash that. Let's talk specifically about a little bit less about a Hollywood blockbuster and a little bit more like a trader, because there are three specific steps. If you do this, and again, this is what I do day in and day out when I build a trade. If you understand this concept and you do it properly, what you'll have is confidence in your trade because you will know why you're taking it, and you will allow yourself the opportunity to say, even though I might have spent a lot of time and effort putting a potential trade together, if I can't feel like there is something actionable at the end of step 3, I can still bail. There's still an escape. And that is so important. At some point within the first stages of your trading process, if you are not asking yourself fairly consistently, is this a good idea? Does this make sense? Is this a good trade to take? Do I understand why this trade could work and why it may not work? If you're not asking yourself that, you really need to understand how to build a trade story narrative. So step 1 we covered pretty well in the initial video. And this is the whole process of the character, which for us is what? The pair, the symbol. I don't care if it's stocks, futures, Forex, or an option. That character is ultimately either specifically the symbol, or sometimes it can be an event. Like non-farm payroll can be a character. The Fed, a Fed minutes release, Fed decision on rates, that can be a character. Okay, it doesn't always have to be a symbol. It's just most often going to be one. So that's what we want to think about. And oftentimes the character should be part of a focused watch list, whether that be a combination of directional bias, whether it be a really good contrast between a strong and weak currency, or whether that be the proximity to an event or proximity to an actionable important level. There are a number of ways to build a watch list. My favorite is to do it with a directional bias. But whatever it is, your character should be on a watch list somewhere. Your character should be being talked about because you've already vetted it. There's a reason that you're willing to build a narrative around it. So that takes you to step 2. And what is the challenge that this character is facing? Is there an issue? Is it volatility? Identifying the challenge gives you insight into timing, and it also gives you some insight into how the trade may actually trigger, what it's going to look like. We can look at that as the problem in movie scripts, right? That's what the character is going to face. Well, the symbol is going to face something. Let me make this a little bit more concrete for you guys. Let's talk about the dollar index. Here the dollar index is reaching a fairly interesting level on the chart. For that reason, it's in my watch list. The challenge is, what's the challenge we're facing? This could be an overbought level. We have ADP released tomorrow. We have non-farm payroll this week. We do have some very high impact data surrounding the story of our character, the dollar. Near term, I could talk about ADP, non-farm payroll. Long term, I can talk about the likelihood for Fed rate hikes throughout 2016. So what are the internal issues with the dollar? Well, we can talk about whether or not the Fed is going to really rely simply on growth and a better employment picture, and sort of put the whole inflation story on the back burner, which is what they were willing to do at the end of 2015. And I can also look at an external issue like China, like the euro. Those are external issues that aren't inherently dollar issues, but can affect the dollar. That takes us to step 3. And you can see step 4 is where the trade is actually built. But if you don't take advantage of steps 1, 2, and 3 to allow yourself to understand why you're focusing on the dollar, for example, why is it even important? The dollar could be important to a trade you may be interested in with the pound versus U.S. dollar. Maybe you want to sell pound, buy U.S. dollars. U.S. dollar strength would be key. Maybe you're thinking that the U.S. dollar is going to weaken, and therefore you're looking for a stronger base currency to pit that potentially weaker dollar against. So again, this is why the character is so important. Looking at the pair, especially in the Forex world, looking at the pair as individual pieces, 2 individual currencies that you're putting together. So then step 3, and this is the clarity. At this point, you should know enough about your character and the challenges, the issue, the volatility it faces to be able to get some clarity. And now you're really ready to say, does this merit a setup? This final step is really what is ultimately going to move us to action. Do I have enough to motivate, to create enough confidence to get me to say, yeah, I like this story about the New Zealand dollar US, or am I going to back away because I fear, for example, global dairy was a slight pullback? Or am I going to be concerned that any kind of move from China could affect the New Zealand dollar as it has before? Or am I going to expect that ComDoll's may be weaker because the Dow has been fairly heavy? So there are other aspects. So once I get the story, again, built up to step 3, at step 3, if you're not feeling that you have enough confidence to get you over the hurdle of, okay, I've got this idea, now I've got to go prove it with price. Now I've got to go to the chart, look at what the setup is, look what the market trend is, what prices are in play, where's the support, where's the resistance. That is not step 1. Far too many traders start at the chart. Big mistake. You've got to build the narrative and then go to the chart. A trade is a story that you can wrap your head around, and then you go prove with price. Proving with price is step 4. Getting a story that you can wrap your head around are steps 1 through 3. And I highly recommend you think more like an author or a screenwriter or Hollywood about building your character. We love movies that have good characters. Seldom do movies with poor character development ever do well, because we think in stories. We want to understand the process of whatever the challenge is, getting better, winning the race, getting the girl, getting, whatever defeating the empire, right? Blowing up the Death Star, whatever it is. We want to see it through somebody's perspective. In Star Wars, it was Luke. So we want to do it. And, I don't know how many of you just saw The Big Short. The idea of the housing meltdown and Michael Lewis wrapping it up through the viewpoint of really 4 or 5 characters. In the movie, they basically focus on about 4 characters. The reason we were compelled to watch is because we were watching it through the perspective of those 4 characters. Think about your character. It will keep you out of trouble. See you in the next update.